Hey, happy Super Bowl Sunday. It's Colonel K here. We're just spending the afternoon before we go in and clean up and prepare to watch the Super Bowl game. Go Chiefs. Hey, I'm a Midwest guy, what can I say? Started on the hood removal, and which is a bit of a challenge. Had to use the engine hoist to get up high enough. Actually, I think I'm going to put a 2x up here, run across, and the leg bolted in, and then I'm going to put my block and tackle on there. It'd be a lot easier to hoist this thing up and down, or anything else I might have to do. So next I'm going to go ahead and pull my fan blade off my pump. I'm kind of thinking maybe I might just pull my pump. Looking at my shroud and everything here, I got to take a look underneath. I can't remember what there is to do to get my shroud off, but I might be better off just pulling my pump, because actually I've only got a few bolts here in the front to do to take that off. And I could also take a look at it inside. I haven't, make sure everything is. I've got extra gaskets, so that's not an issue. So I may end up doing that. Alright, drain cock's open. Drain in the radiator. Alright, we're getting ready to pull our drive shaft off. This is off the PTO for the front winch. I think it's a 9/16. I do have a slight bit of a leak here, so we'll take a look at replacing that seal if I can find one. The magic word. The way this drive shaft comes off, and the reason we have to take this off is because it goes through the radiator. And since we're moving a radiator, there is a front shield that protects behind the winch, that protects the lower part of the radiator, and if we could pull that off, we wouldn't have to mess with the radiator. But I got to tell you, you cannot get at the bolts for the screws, the armored screws. There's no way to get at the bolts, the backside of the screws. So it's just, we're SOL there. So I'm gonna have to do it the hard way. I remember this is my technique, so somebody else might have a better idea, or they do something a little differently, but I'd like to know how, because you really cannot get at the all the goodies that hold the brake lines in and the wiring harness in. Let's see if we get this bad boy off here. There we go. That's all we needed. Now it should come back my way. There, it comes off the spline. Yep. We off? Yep. Okay, now we're no longer inside the radiator, right?
Nope.
Good. That looks like it needs a little grease.
Nope, that spline's right at the radiator.
Yeah, okay. Alright, so now we just go upstairs and we gotta unbutton that, I'm sorry, we gotta unbutton that there, right there.
Brass pipe?
Yeah, here's a screwdriver. I don't know if you need a bigger one or not. You need a light?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, let's. Well, I gotta take a look. We got a king castle nut on this seal that's got to come off. If we're gonna take a look at replacing that, that is an interesting setup.
That is.
I'm gonna have to look at the book on that one.
Okay, I gotta undo the bracket up here.
Actually, you might have to land up pulling this off. And your seal's inside of that. I think we got to pull those 4 bolts, 3 bolts as I was, and they're tied, which is good. 3 bolts, but they are tied off, so that's no big deal. We'll just tie them back off. What do you need, guy?
I gotta undo the bracket here.
What do you need for a wrench?
Drop the whole pipe.
You need a socket. What do you need? 9/16, 5/8?
Yeah, I was looking like 9/16 open
All right,
end
hang one.
socket.
Okay. Since we're replacing these, I might just cut them. Sometimes it's easier. Man, look at that. They came apart very nicely. Hang on. The backside is busted loose. Okay, now I should be able to lay it down. There you go, my man.
Alright.
My brother.
I gotta turn this one.
Yeah, be careful with the radiator. Is it
Yeah,
nice and
yeah.
loose? No. I don't want to damage the radiator.
No, I know. Necks are easy to damage.
Yeah, well, you need the screwdriver to loosen the rubber up?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. That's what I did up here. This is metal because this is the oil cooler.
Probably loosen it back up off the pipe first.
Well, yeah, whatever. Whatever's easiest. And I think we're going to take that out if we can because I want to polish this brass up. I've decided I'm going to polish the brass up and then
Right.
treat it. I love the fact that they put brass pipes on here. Diebold safe square. Right here, see that?
Oh yeah.
Diebold put a little safe on there.
Yep.
They made the plate here in Ohio. You just gotta love stuff like that. I just love the history of that stuff, man. It just
That's what it is. It's
it is so freaking cool. Okay, let's pull this. Let me get a wrench, right wrench. That looks like a 1/2 inch. Let's get a line wrench. Pull that off, and then we
top
gotta
line too.
yeah, we gotta get the radiator. Top line? On that side up there.
Yep.
We'll pull it off. Yeah, you know, we'll pull it off where it goes into the oil cooler, and then we'll work it off the end. We'll work it out over there. That radiator didn't have any leaks except the neck when we fixed it. I mean, to me, that's just unbelievable.
That is unbelievable, that old.
A 1/2 inch gets this. And this line is messed up going into this tank. It does not fit right, which is good because I've got all new line now, so I'll make a new piece. It doesn't seal right going into the tank. We also want to take this off. I'm going to pull this tank, we'll take a look at the bottom of it. I might have to do a little brazing, I'm not sure. Overflow tank,
Yep.
or it could just be the line is.
So that's the overflow tank.
Yeah, we don't have a pressure radiator cap on this system. It's not a pressurized system.
Just a flow.
It's just, yeah. And if you notice here, what it says is you never remove the cap on the overflow tank.
Right.
You let it cool down enough, and then you pull the radiator cap, which is opposite of what cars are today.
Right.
You never take the radiator cap off. You
Because
pull the overflow.
pull the overflow.
The overflow tanks is where you fill your amount on it. All right, so here's where we're at. we got our radiator unbolted and up. We chained around the supports on the side. So we dropped our shaft. There's that very unique opening that the White Truck Company built the radiators to allow your drive shaft to go through. That just boggles my mind. There is a steel frame around the radiator, which makes it easier to lift. Here are the 3 brackets that we've got to get at, and of course our brake lines and our put our new wiring harness in. And in addition, we had to loosen up these brackets on the side. We took all of our water lines off, and you know, it's like remodeling a house. Remodeling's always way more work than it, you know, building from new. And if we were doing this, a restoration on this, we would completely have this thing torn down and, you know, right down to the bare metal and blast it, and then we could put all these components in and then put everything back together and build on top of that. But of course that defeats the purpose of the preservation project. We need to keep everything as original as we can. So you can see all the original paint. It's actually in very good shape. So brake lines off next. Old wiring harness pulled, and we'll get our brackets cleaned up and new bolts in. I'm not going to mess with that stuff there. We'll just put new bolts in, and then go ahead and get all that hooked up and put our radiator back into place, and drive shaft and fan blades and hoses and pipes, and yeah, a lot of work just to get to these 3 little brackets. But I just don't know how else we could have got them. There's just not enough room, and I can't take this front plate off because the bolts up on top, they're underneath here. I couldn't even get at them. So you got to pull the radiator up. That's all there is to it. And of course we want to be gentle because it's 77 years old. Alright, so here's where we're at with the radiator. I didn't pull my water pump because I had enough height with my shroud, although I'm right on my hub. As you can see, the radiator's huge. It's got a really good steel framework around it, and it's actually what I'm using is my bolts on the side here for the brackets on each side, and just got my lift employed. Interesting, some of the posts I've read that they talk about this cross member here in the front, and a lot of folks say that the white half track, which is what this has, never had that, but my track certainly does, and my track's all original. I got all my water pipes off, and they're brass, and I'm going to go ahead and clean them up, and actually I might just kind of put a little polish on them just for the little bling bling, and then seal them with a lacquer sealer. I'm also replacing all of my rubber lines. They're a little older, but yeah. I had 3 hinges on this side of the hood that were not working properly. They wouldn't move at all, and my 2 front hinges had pins broken in them. So I went ahead and tore those down. I've got those hinges fixed that were not working. They move very nicely now. The other ones, I had to drive the broken pieces of pins out, so I had to heat them up a bit. So I'll go ahead and I have material. I'll make new pins, touch those up with some paint, and then go from there. I have one brass, I have one brass pipe to remove here. This is Gates hose. It's a really good hose, 1.5 inches. But I'm going to go ahead and replace all of it because it was initially when I brought this thing from Africa. I replaced the hose in '07 when I got it started for the first time. Yeah, this irritates me. When I pulled my hood, I forgot about my ground strap here. Oops. So I'll have to go ahead and patch my end and put that back on. But so So I'm ready to go ahead and I'm going to start grinding or snap those bolts off, get those brackets out, get my 2 brake lines out that I have to remake so I have a pattern. You can really see that cutout in the radiator there for the drive shaft. And the shroud's got a nice built-in protector to go over it. That drive shaft, by the way, I should weigh it because it's feather light. I guess basically, you know, for what it does, it's not really carrying any real stress on it because all it does is it just spins the linkage here for my winch. So the real work is done here in the winch. But yeah, it's surprising because, you know, I look at of course my drive shaft in the front wheel drive would be very heavy considering what it does. It's driving a lot of torque from the transfer case to the front axle. But the drive shaft for the winch is, I couldn't believe how light it was. I'd kind of forgotten that. So here's the new wire harness part of that. The other one's down below. Runs the lights. Again, that's one of the reasons we ended up pulling the radiator up enough to get at those brackets. I was fortunate I forgot I had one of these. This is actually for a heater, a heat sink. And I had gotten it because this one here is really, I don't know if it's damaged to the point where it's no longer functional. But since it's so easy to swap out and I definitely want to do that now that I'm redoing these wiring harness into the cabin. Anybody out there's looking for a wire harness, I have one. I'd be more than happy to, you know, donate to your operation. As long as you're not selling it to somebody, I wouldn't charge you for it. But I just don't care. It's all numbered. I prefer to use an original one, and that's what I'm doing. So that being said, it's a horn wire. My horns sound great. They're tuned. I don't have screens on them, unfortunately. They were probably removed in the rebuild process. A lot of stuff was changed in the rebuild process. All the shielding was removed. Even though the original radios were used, they did change the shielding. So a lot of that stuff's disappeared. I suppose it was just considered excess and really not. I think a lot of it was taken off during the war, honestly. People worked on this stuff. They just disposed of it. Waterproofing and shields for the radio interference, etc., etc. Similar to what you see on the World War II Jeeps. Initially, they had a ton of shielding, but as radios changed and the designs changed, the shielding components went away. All the little straps and stuff in 43, 44, 45. A lot of that really was cut back to what they needed. So my original radios, I had a gentleman, and believe it or not, I knew how these things worked. I've got the books and everything on them, but I am not an electrician. Of course, I teach myself pretty much everything, so I probably could figure it out. The radios do work. They're 10-channel push-button crystal radios. So they use there's a crystal set in that drawer on the top over there where the one screw's hanging open. I've got an extra, another receiver. I can change and right now I've got the modification for this is set up as the signal core radio system 528. If I wanted to change the designator, all I have to do is add another receiver and pull the parts box out of there. My parts box is full of original tubes and everything else to maintain the radios. But yeah, the gentleman really, he had an impressive warehouse of stuff. I've not actually been in contact with him. That was back in 2010. So it's pretty cool to run across people that still do this, and there are a few people out there. So all right, I'm gonna get to work and get those brackets off, and I'll give you an update when I get my brake lines out and the brackets off. Thanks.
916.
Back at it. Bent new brake lines, but one thing I had noticed here in my recovery tank, which is cleaned up nice and everything, but it's original, and I had some weeping from the fitting here. Hello. So Jeffers and I are going to go ahead and yank that thing out. If it's got a bad seat, which I believe is what's going on here, I may have to actually take the fitting out and weld in a new one. Or braze in a new one or weld it in. Awesome. Now let's take a look at this bad boy in here. And I got a feeling that it is... Wow. Okay. I'm trying to understand how this fitting works. It does not have a seat.
No seat?
I'm not seeing one. What that is, it looks like it's old sealant, you know, that was on the threads.
Right.
I'm not seeing a seat there, brother.
Straight in shot.
Yeah, well, those lines aren't set up that way, though. They're set up for a seat. So, let's take a look. There is absolutely no seat in here. It is not set up with a beveled edge for a... And so how the heck... Probably never really held fluid. I mean, it's probably dripped and I just didn't catch it. But that's certainly not effective.
System.
Huh?
There's no pressure.
Well, it's still no. It's not a pressurized system as we know it. You know, that's a pretty solid cap. What it is, it blows anything back up into the recovery tank, and then as it cools off, it sucks it back down. Pretty much what we do on today's car.
Right.
But the difference is today's cars are sealed, and you fill anything in the radiator cap, you never fill anything in here, which is, I don't know, it's like, okay, would you put it up there and it would flow down? No. It goes in here to fill up, but anything that, where any fluid that's gonna pressurize and come out. In fact, this engine, you gotta run a thermostat in it because the size of the radiator and the fan, it'll not come up to temperature if you don't.
Right.
It'll run so cold, it's inefficient, so it becomes an inefficient running engine. So you gotta run with I got a 180 in there. You got to run with a thermostat. It'll never heat up enough.
Okay.
Maybe out in the desert, but I mean normal weather.
Normal.
No, it won't heat up enough. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because, well, no, I know with a thermostat, if I close my louvers in the summer, it'll heat up.
It heats right.
Oh yeah. When I did that photo shoot for the Haggerty, we had the thing shut for photos and forgot we were driving around. I noticed that the temperature gauge was really creeping up, so I had the photographer Gary open the shutter up on his side, and man, about 4 or 5 minutes it was right down. Yeah, it fits in there fine, but we don't want to run it that way. Wow, that's not even a double flange. That's just a single flange. I'll definitely put a double flange on there. Yeah, they're both single flange. Maybe that is supposed to fit up in there, but there's nothing for it to fit against. Unless you can get an insert and screw it in there, but then again, you'd have to...
You'd still have, the line could go up and down inside.
Yeah, it's not going to work. I need to get either cut this out, which I really kind of hate to do, put a new one in with a flange in it, or just the adapter would be the easiest way to go if I can find one.
Right. Man.
See, if you had an adapter like that,
Right.
and this was tapped out, and you could screw another one in with a seat on it, we'd be good to go. So that's what we got to find. So that's a 3/8. That's a 20 pitch. I think it's 20 pitch. It could be 28. I'll have to measure it. But I could find one of these with a 1/4-inch adapter. I know they're out there. I've seen those at hot rod shops and some of this stuff like Summit with a 1/4-inch adapter. And then
Well, see,
just,
this would be your adapter with a seat though.
well, I just run a 1/4 inch line instead of the 5/16.
Right.
Spillway's 1/4 inch. I don't know what this. I don't know initially what was on here, and I could look in the book, but I don't even know if it'll have the description because it'll just say replace the line. It may have the ordinance manual may have a line diameter.
Okay.
But well, thanks for helping me get that off. Okay. New lines, wiring harness, brackets in, all this to get that done. We've got our new brake lines in. A little manipulation on that one just to get it to work. Everything's a challenge. So I'm going to put a couple of reinforcing rubber pieces on the original insulators that go on here because it's starting to get a little bit worn. And we found the correct Zerk fitting. Got that in there. It was missing. I have no idea how long it's been out of there. That's why there was not the grease in there, because there was no Zerk fitting and I missed it. So, that being said, drop the radiator back down. I've got to plug these in, but I think I've got new wiring, new little harnesses. I can still reuse these. The wires are pretty good, but I think I've got brand new ones in a box somewhere. I got to see if I can scrounge those up, and then I can go ahead and, for the pedestal lights, I might go ahead and just put new ones in. Otherwise, the other wires are still in good shape. Although I'll have to chase them with the ohm meter because I'm not sure which does what. So that's where we're at. Oh yeah, let me take a look at that bad boy. It's radiator cut out. So, and as you can see, where I had to solder this up and we recovered it. And a little reinforcement around the bottom drain, which is 1.5 inch. The other ones are 1 3/4 IDs for the hoses. What to do about getting new hoses, and of course the auto stores, they'll look at you with the deer in the headlights lights look. They're not really auto stores, they're just you know, they all carry the same thing. Even the farm store didn't carry it. That's that Tractor Supply place, and I gotta tell you, what a joke. Carry one type of lube oil. It's just like, really, man. If farmers were all homogenous in their equipment, I guess it would work, but in my opinion, they blow. As do most auto stores. So I'll have to go to probably a truck stop. They'll have actual real hose. And somebody could say, well, you can't expect them to carry any. You know what? You could carry a roll of 1 3/4 or 2 inch. I mean, I'm talking just a roll. I mean, come on. Be a real auto supply store. Napa probably carry it, but Napa's a little ways from here, so I have found that Napa carries a lot of things. The other stores, when you go in, and unless it's some kind of uniform oil, blades, generator for your 2017 whatever piece of. Sorry, man, I'm just pontificating. All right, there we go. All right, radiator's back in place, all bolted in. Getting my pipes stripped down and cleaned up, getting ready to polish and seal. I'll work on those tonight in the house where my machine's at. And brake lines are done. Pulled my lamps out, my lights out. I got to hook that wiring up down below and just seeing if I could figure out the configuration here. And interestingly enough, the insides of the lamp, here's an extra set of that wiring, actually has a headlight mark on it. It says HD. So this thing is sitting in there basically like this. So my outside pin is my headlight. I believe my inside pin will be my blackout light, and then the other pin is the ground. So all I'm going to do is just take my ohm meter and trace it from here to the plug down there on a real long ground. And I'll be able to plug in down below, and I know which is which. So that's easily solved. And now that the harness is all ready to go in down there, I've just got to plug 3 wires into my existing setup. So I did pull this I was trying to figure out if I had to take this barrel out. I was just trying to figure out how I would do it, and it looks like it's actually pressed in with a rubber surround. But I thought it was interesting. There's a, it says white, so that's the original World War II color. You can see the difference in the oxidation of the lead paint versus the original World War II paint. Quite a bit of oxidation, but everything's stamped. I love it, stamped white. There's a lot of stuff down there I found. And I had mentioned the safe, the die-bolt safe on the armor. Let's see on the hood, which we fixed, by the way. All the hinges have been repaired. The broken hinges, I made new pins. You can see that, brand new pins. These hinges were not functioning. Those are all done. Let's see if I can find a serial number. There was one up on top here. There we go. So each armor plate was serial number, because these were actually considered secure items back in the day. So I've got 469 Whiskey Hotel 12, and then I've got this little bitty safe on there. That square is the Diebold safe sign. So Diebold safe from Ohio, where this whole track was actually manufactured, did the armor plate. That means they would have drilled everything out and then run it through furnaces and steel hardened it. 1/4-inch plate. It's really stood up well over the years. A lovely storage in the African desert. Something sure busted this. Takes a lot to break the plate. I broke it in 2 spots. Something hit this pretty hard. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like a round. But something really busted that hard. And somebody did some cutting back in the day. That's what that should look like. That's what it looks like now. Honestly, I might actually take a brass hammer and go ahead and repair that. Just kind of fill this back in. Although I want to be careful with not damaging the paint. It looks like the French might have thrown a coat of paint on here by hand, because I've seen brush marks. Yeah, and I'm seeing multiple layers of paint here. The original green paint, and then there's this other paint on top, and I've seen some runs in the paint in some areas. Either used I'm not sure what they used. Again, here's the original markings. Signal Corps Radio System 528 with Interphone BC, I think it's 650. Is the intercom system. French markings here. Correction, these are the U.S. markings to let the French know what they were getting. This is from our quartermaster before the half-track was transferred to the French in Korea. So it's really kind of cool to go take a little bit of the surface paint off. Yeah, you can see the sags here. This is really bad. I don't know if it was with a paintbrush or a really crappy sprayer, but yeah, there's all kinds of sags in here and runs, drips. Yeah, somebody did a really pretty rough paint job. That is not a factory paint job. We did much better work. So, one thing I love about the white, all your screws, they're vertical. The reason is horizontal screws would catch water, it would catch rainwater, it would start rusting the screw heads out. White was the only manufacturer. International had all welded hulls. White was the only of the 3 other manufacturers that made sure every bolt, every head on the screw, these armored screws, was vertical or any area where it had to be, so the rain would never collect inside the screws. And that's pretty ingenious stuff. I mean, it's a lot of time to make sure all those, other than just cranking them on there and tightening them up. Somebody had to make sure those things were all lined up properly. I find that kind of stuff fascinating. And just a real salute to the craftsmanship, which we still exhibit in this country today, but which was really just an important part of our heritage in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. Considering this thing is 77 years old, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or Indochina in that time, and then tour in Africa, it's really stood up. finished. You know, I might leave the hood off because I've still got to do this wiring harness over. I just do not trust this son of a gun. I mentioned that before. I just don't like the way it works. So I've got a new harness to put in there and disconnect everything underneath the dash and go ahead and get that installed. Hopefully get the headlights hooked up tomorrow, and I can put some juice from one of my chargers onto the wiring to make sure all the lights function. I actually do have extra bulbs, which I bought a long time ago, and I just actually found them today and unpacked. So there we are. All right, we'll get this buttoned up tomorrow, and we'll call this finished. Thanks. All right. Here's where we're at. Fan blade reinstalled, wired up. All our water pipes are in with new hose. Some new clamps. Some of these older clamps are just plain worn out, and I didn't go with them. So, drive shaft for the winch. Let's see what else. I still have to get my tank. Still got to do work on my fitting for my tank. I've got that figured out, but I've got to order a couple parts. These local stores here just don't have this kind of stuff. Hell, and Napa's the only one that even had hose, and the 3/4 inch and then 1.5. So interesting. I learned about my headlights. The blackout lamp. This is a resistor, and basically the blackout lamps in World War II are 6 volt. I don't have a 12 volt lamp, so I actually burned one out by accident. I was testing my lights to see if they worked, and I don't have the wires. I just basically used a battery charger just to see if the wiring was correct. And I burned out one of my 6 volt lamps, but luckily I had another one. So, and they actually are marked. This one is actually marked 6 volts. So what you've got is when you're bringing in 12 volts here, you're stepping it down to 6 volts, and only on this side, the side of the track. This particular light is just a 6 volt light. That's your blackout marker. Both the bulbs in these I had to order new bulbs for these. They're a single bayonet type. 15S is what they call the base. I ordered a bunch of extra ones. Both lights work. I put the cover back on here. I left this one off just to make sure. So my blackout lights don't work, but both headlights work. So that's refreshing. I did trace the plugs down there. And I had actually picked up a filter quite a while ago and not realizing what that was for. It wasn't really clear in my wiring diagram. But after talking to a couple of folks, I now realize what that thing is. And so that'll step my voltage down for just the one light. I marked up my anything with oil here on this side of the engine. I had never marked those up, so now they're painted red, which just indicates that those are oil points that have to be checked. So what's next? Well, I'm going to start the wiring underneath the dashboard, which is a real project. I'm going to rip that old wiring out, or that wiring harness, which is newer, and actually use the original wiring harness. And I need to install the horns. I have a separate wiring harness. I got to go ahead and take my air cleaner off here and then install the new horn wiring. Once I get that wiring done, I'll go ahead and reinstall the hood now that I've fixed all the hinges. You know, it's just a lot of little stuff. All I'm doing is just fixing all these little things that I had never gotten a chance to get at before. Did not prevent or prohibit the track from running, and etc. Although there was a cost, because I did, if you look at my film on my bogies, on my track install, you'll find that my bogies were frozen up. I didn't realize that until I pulled the track off, or actually until I broke one of my shafts on my bogies. It snapped off when I was driving out in the field here doing a picture shoot for Haggerty. So we were ripping around out there, and which was a lot of fun, but when I got in, I realized one of my bogies was at an angle and I had snapped the shaft off. That's because the shaft was not rotating, the bogie was not rotating on the shaft. So when I hit something out in that field, what gave was the bogie. So, I like the way my brass pipes came out. They had paint on them before, and that probably isn't the standard, but a little bling bling, it's not a bad thing. So, I really do like the way my pipes came out, the brass pipes. I just think it's indicative of the craftsmanship in the 40s, that they would actually put brass water pipes in. I don't know about tanks. I'm not familiar enough with the tanks and what kind of piping they had. Although the first tanks were air cooled because they were aircraft engines, but we did go to different engines by the end of the war on some of our vehicles. So anyway, yeah. So let's tear into the wiring next. Get the dashboard all torn down. Get that replaced. Hood back on. That'll pretty much finish all this. Of course, I've got to get the brakes filled up and tested and bled. Now that all the brake lines are complete, all the brakes have been rebuilt and everything's complete there. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I say, what a boatload of work to get at the 3 clips. Of course, I had to get at the brake line and also the wiring harness. So it all worked out. But other than that, we're going to call this this segment complete. So I'll get back to you on our next segment will be the wire. I will finish this tank, get that reinstalled, and of course the line that bleeds back in, I'll have to make a new one. And I've just got to get a fitting for that tank. And then when I do the wiring harness, I'll go ahead and swap out the old resistor, which is pretty rusted. It probably still functions, but it's definitely rusted. And I had one. I had picked up one. So. And there's some other stuff I've picked up. I did find some extra light bulbs in one of my boxes. You probably need to tear every box apart and see what half-track parts I have. I've tried to keep most of them in boxes that are marked half-track and et cetera, but some stuff got mixed. This is basically 3 moves. Wisconsin to Arizona, Arizona to here, and stuff's unpacked, repacked, or never unpacked. So other than that, the weather's been crappy, rainy, snowy, and cold. But thank you for joining me. Subscribe, and please keep watching. We're getting here. Another bite of the elephant, eh? All right, this is Colonel K. You have a good one.